Welcome to the Rap Soul Podcast, where we dive deep into the world of music that moves our hearts and gets our feet tapping. This is the intersection of rap and soul music from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. We appreciate you for listening. Share this podcast with a friend or family member who loves music as much as you do. The podcast is hosted by 12 Kyle. Next up, the Rap Soul Podcast.
I'd be remiss if I did not start with the front man from the group Public Enemy, and that would be none other than Chuck D. I don't think Chuck D was probably ever as hot as he was in 1989. Public Enemy didn't release an album in 89, but Chuck D was riding the wave of their album that came out in 88. It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. And then, of course, the summer anthem of 1989, along with the movie Do the Right Thing, Fight the Power. Welcome to another edition of the Rap Soul Podcast. I am your boy 12 Kyle. I want to thank you all for tuning in as you do each and every week. Again, this is the Rap Soul Podcast. This is the intersection where we have discussions about music, more specifically rap and soul music from the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s when it comes to rap, hip-hop, soul, and R&B. Simply put, folks, this is the best music podcast that you have never heard until right now. Again, this is the Rap Soul Podcast. Shout out to those of you who are watching on YouTube. Man, check this out. All right, so if you've been following the podcast, you know that I've been breaking down the top 12 years in hip-hop. We started off with number 12, then we made our way down to number 11, and now we are at number 10, and the number 10 spot is being held by the year of 1989. If you've been following the podcast, what I normally talk about on these episodes is some of the breakout stars, some of the rappers who were at the apex, the essential albums that you had to get, and then the classics. And of course, we use the term classic very loosely because, it's very subjective, but what people deemed as classics, those were the albums that we're going to talk about. But one of the things that stood out to me in 1989 that I don't want you guys to get lost on is the fact that 89 was a great year for rap music. And it wasn't even called hip hop at the time. But where rap was at that particular time was it started to expand a little bit. What I mean by that is it wasn't just regional. And one of the ways that rap grew a little bit as far as being beyond the regions was the advent of technology. And given the fact that a lot of rap songs that we heard on the radio or we had access to now were being accompanied by a video. And so now you get the visuals, and you get see the visuals on entities like Yo MTV Raps and Rap City. And so now, you're able to tap into certain neighborhoods and maybe certain areas and certain albums that you may or may not have been able to get your hands on per se, but now the music is readily available because now you're seeing a video for a song from an artist that you may or may not know. And then that makes you want to go to the record store and buy the tape or buy the record actually. So, but another thing that stood out to me about 1989 was that there were 4 acts that were in a pivotal point because they were releasing their sophomore albums. And those acts were the Beastie Boys, Big Daddy Kane, EPMD, and the Jungle Brothers. Now, if you've been hiding under a rock, you know the Jungle Brothers released their debut album Straight Out of the Jungle in 1988. Big Daddy Kane released Long Live the Kane in 1988. EPMD released Strictly Business in 1988, and the Beastie Boys released License to Ill in 1986. And so each of those acts followed up, those smash albums with a sophomore album. So you had to see whether or not the sophomore jinx was going to be in effect. In 1989, the Beastie Boys released Paul's Boutique. Big Daddy Kane released It's a Big Daddy Thing. EPMD followed up Strictly Business with Unfinished Business, and the Jungle Brothers followed up with Straight Out of the Jungle Done by Forces of Nature. And so the pressure was on. You didn't want to have a smash album and then have a flop. But, that didn't happen to anybody in this group. So as you guys know, if you've been following the podcast, one of the things that we do is we do a couple of things. We talk about the breakout stars in that particular year, 1989. Then we talk about the rappers that we feel that were at their apex or at the apex that particular year, basically on top of the game. And then we talk about the essential albums from that particular year. And then last but not least, we talk about the classics. And I put that in quotations because classics obviously can be defined different ways by different people. But what we feel like was, deserved to be a classic, or at least labeled as a classic. So let's get it cracking. Like I said, you had a couple of artists who were going into their sophomore albums. So the pressure was on. And I think one of the things that stood out to me about rap then was it was the level of competition was really, really tough at that particular time. We just come off 1988, and we'll get to that. We'll get to 1988 a little ways down the road. But 1988 was an incredible year, and 89 did not fall off at all. And 87, in a lot of ways, kicked things off. So the back half of the 80s were really, really dope for albums and hip hop acts. They didn't make a lot of money, relatively speaking, but they produced a lot of great music. And so, I will say, as far as like the breakout stars, one of the breakout stars, in my opinion, was a guy who released his debut album straight out of the NBA, straight out of the NWA crew. And that was my man, the DOC. Now, the DOC's originally from Dallas, but we kind of, because he was in NWA's crew, we lumped him in with, LA and California to be specific. But he dropped his debut album, No One Could Do It Better. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. But he was definitely a breakout star in 1989. Another breakout star in 1989 was another guy who dropped his debut album, and that would be none other than the Cool Gangster of Rap, a.k.a. Cool G Rap. Now, a lot of people, a lot of MCs from the 90s and in the 2000s, they talked about how when they talk about the influences, when you talk about MCs like Nas, Raekwon, even Jay-Z, Biggie, when they talk about mafioso rap, the first one of that genre was the great Cool G Rap. And, G Rap, man, was a rapper's rapper. That first album, Rags to Riches, was incredible, and it was everywhere. And I think he was someone who definitely was a breakout star. I don't think he really got the shine nationally that he probably should have gotten, but a phenomenal MC. And he was definitely one of those ones that was rapping about the street life, and he gave it a different perspective. And then once we saw the visuals, we got an idea as to who he was and what he was about. Another breakout star that particular year was none other than Dana Owens, a.k.a. the Queen. Hail the Queen, Latifah. Latifah, man, I really don't know what you can say about Latifah that hasn't been said. When I tell you that she was dope from day one, she literally and figuratively was dope from day one. Like, there was no fall off in her raps. She came with a very unique perspective because she stood for sisterhood. She stood for power. She stood for women empowerment. She strived to be a role model for young ladies. And she did just that. I loved Latifah from the beginning. Many hip hop fans call her the greatest of all time as far as female MCs are concerned. You get no argument from me. I mean, Latifah has been doing it literally and figuratively since day one. But 1989, she was definitely a breakout star. When we talk about rappers who were at the apex, at the top of the game that particular year, I'd be remiss if I did not start with the front man from the group Public Enemy, and that would be none other than Chuck D. I don't think Chuck D was probably ever as hot as he was in 1989. Of course, they Public Enemy didn't release an album in 89, but Chuck D was riding the wave of their album. The first album that came out in 88, It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. And then, of course, the summer anthem of 1989, along with the movie Do the Right Thing, Fight the Power. Man, listen. And then what made it even more sweeter was when you got a chance to sit and listen to Chuck D talk. Chuck D was there to, enlighten you and tell you about what it was. He actually had a method to his madness, and he eloquently explained how and why Public Enemy looked and sounded and felt the way that they did to their consumers, which was us. But yeah, Chuck D was incredible. Much love to Chuck D, one of the greatest voices in hip hop history. Another guy who was at his apex, I mentioned a little earlier, Big Daddy Kane. Big Daddy Kane, from the success of the first album, Long Live the Kane, slowly but surely was becoming what a lot of people considered to be a sex symbol in rap at the time. And there weren't a lot of sex symbols in rap, I'll be honest. Of course, I didn't see him as a sex symbol, but I mean, the ladies loved Kane at that particular time. But Kane, man, I mean, not only was Kane a dope rapper and he was someone that the ladies considered to be a sex symbol, but Kane also, if you saw Kane perform, Kane, he had his two dancers, Scoob and Scrap, and he would do the dance moves with Scoob and Scrap. And I mean, like at that particular time, no rapper was dancing. I mean, let's be honest. And, having choreographed moves, maybe with the exception of Heavy D, there was no other rappers that were doing the dance moves with their dancers. And Kane was very smooth and very fluid, and a fan favorite for sure. Another rapper that was probably at the apex was the legend, Slick Rick, known for his iconic eye patch, his super dope stories, riding the wave of his album in 1988. I would say Slick Rick probably was at the top of his game as well. It was a lot. It was a growing battle for the top spot in rap at that particular year. I don't necessarily know that anyone claimed the spot per se, but I would say that these three gentlemen were at their apex. Now, when you talk about essential albums or essential albums that you had to have, there was a couple of them. I would say the aforementioned Jungle Brothers, done by the Forces of Nature. That was a really, really solid album. Now, of all the albums that I'm going to mention, I think this is probably the only album that I didn't purchase. I did cop a dub. For you kids at home, that means someone made a copy of the tape for me, and I kept the tape. I did cop a dub. Shout out to my boy Jay Fresh, and so I did have it. I will say this much: I played their first album, Straight Out of the Jungle, way more than I played this one. But it was a very solid album. But it was essential to have. It was one of those joints where you went to school, and the conversation may come up, and everybody was talking about the JBs, or at least in my school they were. But you wanted to have that album so people would know that you were kind of down. Next up is the aforementioned Big Daddy Kane album. It's a Big Daddy thing. Another solid album from Kane. I don't think it was as good as Long Live the Kane, but the fall off wasn't there. I mean, like, again, these are sophomore albums for the both of them, and there's not really much fall off. I mean, are they the same albums? No, they're not the same albums, but there's not a lot of fall off there. Now, when we talk about classics, I think these albums that I'm going to mention are all classics. Now, are they all-time classics? No, but they're classics for this particular year. First up, the aforementioned Kool G Rap and DJ Polo, Road to the Riches. Man, listen, from start to finish, that album is a phenomenal piece of work. If you have not heard that album, and what's interesting is that I always find when I have discussions sometimes with hip hop fans, a lot of people heard this album, but they don't go back to this album. Like, so you got to go back. If you haven't heard this album in the last year or two, go back and listen to it, man. There's a lot that he's rapping about now, and back then, that you can relate to now. And then also, one of the things that still impresses me is the fact that Kool G Rap's flow, his subject matter and his flow, you can tell where he influences the likes of Nas and Raekwon and Jay-Z and Biggie. Great album. Also, another classic, the aforementioned All Hail the Queen by Queen Latifah. I just remember we had been waiting on this. We didn't know when it was coming out because there was no such thing as a rollout back then. But I remember when it came out, man, me and my homeboy, we had to figure out which one, because neither one of us had money. But I bought the tape and then dubbed it for him, my boy Jay Fresh. And this was a pleasure to listen to. I don't go back often to this album, but when I do, it brings back memories of high school. Like, because I was in high school at the time when this album came out, and this is a breath of fresh air. I'm not even gonna lie. Queen Latifah, dope album. If you haven't heard it, please do yourself a favor and go back to it. Another classic album was the aforementioned Beastie Boys, Paul's Boutique. I will confess, I'm going to let you guys in on a little secret. I heard this album, but I didn't hear it enough. I haven't listened to this album probably in the last 20 years, right? I know it's a great album, and I know that people talk about it and people love it and people swear by it. I just haven't heard it in so long. In fact, maybe that should be my homework for the next episode. Maybe I should either do an album review or at least go back and listen to it and tell y'all that I heard it, because I was such a huge, and still am, such a huge fan of License to Ill. License to Ill always will get played. So if you say, hey, play something from the Beastie Boys, it's going to be Brass Monkey. It's going to be, Paul Revere. It's going to be something like that. It's going to be Hold It Now, Hit It. It's going to be one of those jams because that was my joint. And I was in middle school when that came out. And again, there's no disrespect to Paul's Boutique, because Paul's Boutique by many have been deemed a classic in that particular year. But no, I just, it is phenomenal. I got to go back to it. I'll be honest. The next one, the motherfucking Trigger Happy Ghetto Boys, Grip It on the Other Level. Grip It on That Other Level, excuse me. I love this album. I'm a big fan of Scarface, and it's interesting was one of the things I found interesting was, especially now knowing what I know, because I didn't know what I know now then. But in reading Scarface's autobiography, Scarface revealed the fact that, like, he didn't know Willie D, he didn't know Bushwick Bill, rest in peace. He didn't know DJ Ready Red. I mean, like, they literally came together under the strength of Rap-A-Lot CEO Jay Prince. And so you got these three guys who are rapping and a DJ, and they're from different parts of Houston, and they kind of know each other in circles but don't know each other personally. And then all of a sudden you come up with this idea to form a rap group. And what transpired was this album. And there's different versions of this album, but I mean, incredible. This was one of the first albums, I think, that put the South on the map. But yeah, I will always go back to this one. Phenomenal piece of work. Again, another classic album that it really can't be debated, in my opinion, is the DOC's debut album, No One Can Do It Better. I'll be honest, this is an album that I still listen to at least once a month. And of course, we know about the DOC getting into that tragic car accident, losing his voice and what have you. But before he got into that accident, folks, this man was about to be out of here. This album is incredible. For me, I listened to it all the way through, start to finish. Beautiful but Deadly is, it's okay, but I could deal with it. It's, it's a rock theme or whatever like that. But, with the production from Dr. Dre, the DOC was definitely going to be a superstar before he had that accident. And he had a very small window, but he was a star. And they released a couple of videos. And again, this is a dope album. I think it's probably the second best album to come out in 1989. But it is a classic in my opinion. And I think did it get 4 mics? I think it got like 4.5 mics in the source. But yeah, this album still goes to this day. And last but not least, the Native Tongue's own De La Soul, 3 Feet High and Rising, in my opinion, the best album to come out in 1989, a certified bona fide classic all across the board, an all-time hip-hop classic. What can I say about De La Soul? Rest in peace to Dave. This album was it. This was the one. This was the one that, for me and my friends, really set it off because these dudes were so abstract. You know, when you saw the Me, Myself, and I video, you saw guys, kind of kicking it in a different kind of way. And it was appealing and refreshing to us because they weren't on some gangster shit. They wasn't from, the mean streets of New York City. They were just some regular dudes who seemed to like have some fun. And that album is nothing but fun from start to finish. I thoroughly enjoy listening to it. I still listen to it to this day. 3 Feet High and Rising, again, a bona fide certified classic. If you come across someone who doesn't think that this album is a classic, run away from them because they may be a terrorist. But yeah, in conclusion, I think 1989 was a very, very dope year for rap. I think some of the breakout artists, as far as the DLC, Cool G Rap, Queen Latifah, they left an imprint on the game that particular year. The rappers who were at the apex, Chuck D, Big Daddy Kane, Slick Rick, each of them had a hand in crafting the sound of 1989. Again, there were some essential albums that you had to get. Big Daddy's joint and the Jungle Brothers joint, those were must-haves. And then, of course, there were the classics, Cool G Rap, DJ Polo, Road to the Riches, Queen Latifah, All Hail the Queen, the DLC, No One Can Do It Better. I almost forgot one. Hold up, Timeout, TV Timeout. How can I forget about Unfinished Business, EPMD? Jesus, I'm sorry. I was about to wrap up the podcast and almost forgot about that one. A very dope follow-up to the smash, Strictly Business. My favorite joint on there, So What You're Saying, they had a video for it. They released it, the single. I'm just a huge fan of EPMD, so I'd probably say that might be the third best album. So I'll go 1 with 3 Feet High and Rising, 2 with No One Can Do It Better, and 3 with Unfinished Business. But if you haven't heard Unfinished Business, give that a spin as well. So again, the classics, All Hail the Queen, Road to the Riches, Unfinished Business, EPMD, Grip It on That Other Level by the Ghetto Boys, Paul's Boutique by the Beastie Boys, No One Can Do It Better by the DLC, and of course, 3 Feet High and Rising by De La Soul. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for me. Thanks again for checking out this edition of the Rap Soul Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. We drop new episodes every Thursday. Also, don't forget about the flagship station, the 12 Kyle Podcast. We drop new episodes there every Thursday as well. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Send this to anyone who you deem a music fan. If they are an old school hip hop fan, send it to them because they're definitely going to reminisce on this episode. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for me. Thanks again for checking out this edition of the Rap Soul Podcast. I am your boy 12 Kyle. I'll catch you guys next time. 5,000. Cheers.
Thank you for listening. This concludes the episode. Be sure to subscribe to the Rap Soul Podcast. You can find the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Follow the podcast on social media. And feel free to continue this discussion on our Reddit page. More importantly, share this podcast with a friend or family member who loves music as much as you do. Until next time, 5,000.